because I want to go back and fix it. So it looks
Beautiful.
better.
That would just be great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah. So we're going to be interviewing Kate Gladstone, who has been on my channel once before, sharing her book, Read Cursive Fast, which is a really good book for people who may have learned how to read cursive or forgot, or maybe they just want to learn. So I'm real excited. And Kate had a wonderful article she shared. So,
Okay, Alexa, stop. I forgot that I have my automatic news going on at this time.
okay.
Can you, honey? I'm waiting to play the news until I'm done. Okay, sweetheart. Yeah, I can actually relaunch it later. All I will say is that Amazon Echoes are very wonderful things,
Mm-hmm. They're
and
great.
I think everybody should get one, if possible, more than one, because if you have two in your house, you have an intercom system.
Wow. I mean, I've thought about getting one. I might soon. So we'll see. Maybe after I.
I would say before you do, talk with me, because the model I have isn't even the most recent of many models. And I can probably help you shop through them to meet your needs. I should be able to do at least as well as the people on Amazon who will try to upsell you. I'm very happy with my old low serial number version. I'm very happy with those, but some other people may have other needs. But anyway, given the electronic world, let us get into today's topic, which is not only the book, which I'm sure you'll introduce to those who have not heard about it before, but the question is, how many people are aware that the people who might need to know how to read cursive are people who include people who used to know and who forgot? It literally happens, and since about 1985, 1990, it's been happening more than ever.
Wow. That makes sense. Is it because of the change in curriculums and whatnot?
Well, the scary thing is that it actually predated the change in curriculum at, in many places, and is happening independently of changes in curriculum. In other words, there are places where cursive has been mandated and very enforced in schools for, let's say, the past 20 or 30 years, and they are still having problems. And just to give you a little teaser, a little summary of the problem, there was an investigative report done by a large newspaper in Canada, the Toronto Star.
Mm-hmm.
And although the same thing is happening in the USA, this story happens to have been covered in Canada. In 2013, the Toronto Star sent people to colleges literally to check if the people who were entering as first year students could read cursive. I forget if they actually checked on writing. I think they were just checking on reading cursive. And they found that students from schools in provinces where cursive requirements had been really mandated and enforced all along, by the time those students reached college, they had literally forgotten how, and they were literally not able to read in cursive any better than people who had never been exposed to cursive because their schools had cut it. Now, given that about half of all US states mandate cursive and about half of all Canadian provinces, imagine that you liked cursive and wanted it in the schools, and for whatever reason. Imagine that you spent millions of dollars making sure that everyone in your school district, your school, your state, your province could read and write cursive by having a curriculum and using it every day. And imagine that all of a sudden you started to find that people on whom all this money had been spent and all this training had been given to were not able to do any better than the people for whom the training had not been enforced, had not existed, had just never happened. I think you'd be a little freaked out. And it's
Yeah.
not just the USA, it actually has been happening, I hear, in Canada
Mm-hmm.
and in India and even Brazil, countries that are very, very much stricter about cursive than the USA or Canada have been for about 100 years. They are seeing a huge fallout in terms of people. Basically, anyone born after 1985 has huge odds of not grasping cursive if it's taught, or if they get it taught, forgetting it by the time they are 18. In other words, the world is now literally full of millions of 18-year-olds who not only can't read or write cursive, but a lot of them could write cursive when they were 8, and now at age 8, and at age 18, they can't even read things they wrote when they were 8.
Wow. So
And
they
now
kind of read their
imagine
diary,
finding your
right?
old school notebooks up in the attic and realizing that you couldn't read them, recognizing that what was in them is your handwriting, or was your handwriting. Now, why is this happening now? You know, people have had all kinds of theories. They have thought, oh, school curricula have been changed for whatever good reasons or bad reasons or indifferent reasons. A currently popular theory is that this is some big plot so that we can no longer read the Constitution. And I know there are people who would like us unable to read the Constitution, but it's as if in 1985 a switch had been turned on.
Mhm.
And in a way, this is what happened, because if you think of what a child born in 1985 experiences by the time he's old enough to really be conscious of reading and writing, or she is old enough, the internet and email have come along. In other words, a child who previously, if mom had to communicate with the bank or the electric company or the school or her workplace, very often, if she couldn't get through by phone, she'd write a letter by hand. You would at least get to see handwriting in the act of happening. You would see what stroke came first, last. You would have a lot of environmental, incidental exposure. You might be able to pick out what word was your mom's name, or what word was, bank or something, or electric, or something like that. By the time you reach school, you would have had a lot of exposure. So whatever happened in school, the teacher could rely on you having had a lot of stuff around you. Now these days, the teacher cannot rely on this. The teacher is either not teaching cursive, but let's assume she is. Let's assume that he or she or the state or the school or the district or whatever mandates cursive. And let's assume that the curriculum is, give or take a little. If it's a cursive curriculum, it's what it was. Now, the average cursive curriculum when I was in school, or when you were in school, was very simple. You had learned printing. All of a sudden, you had a new character set, a new writing system called cursive. And how were you introduced? You were probably shown a squiggle that you couldn't read and told, this is a letter G, this is a letter S, this is a letter J, this is a letter H, and basically just copy them and learn them by rote. No indication of how one of these was a G. And I think you have the graphic that I sent you with the 2 different G's and sort of a big question mark.
Oh yes, I can go ahead and
If you can
share
put
that.
that up, in other words,
I will definitely do that.
now, and after that, later on, we will look at another graphic. But if you put this up, you can see, and maybe you can zoom in on that. Basically, this was what school was for me. Okay, now
Got
a
the right
lot of
one, Kate?
people, can pick things up just by rote and exposure. A lot of people can't, particularly people who are neurologically not the average, whether for better or worse. It just doesn't percolate. I was one of these people. I was not reliably reading, let alone writing cursive, till I was already 24 and in graduate school. And one day I would like to tell an episode of the story of how Kate Gladstone went from don't know how to wow, if that's not too prideful.
I mean, if you want to share it on my channel, I'd be perfectly happy.
I would love to share it on your channel at some point, because I always talk about having not had the ability to read anything that wasn't a printed handwriting until age 24. And I say that I taught myself, but actually I did other things that resulted in my teaching myself. But anyway, if you grew up around a heck of a lot of cursive, like people 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, or even 40 years ago, you might be able to make sense of the fact, just by rote memory. Someone tells you that that's Georgia, or that's Gladstone, or that's, God, or whatever. You might be able to just store it in memory, the way that people, learn Chinese characters. But you could do that if you had, cursive every day at school, and then a lot of stuff, a lot of cursive stuff around you outside school. These days, the mother or the father who would previously have been writing letters by hand to people is emailing them or calling on the phone more often because it's easier now to call long distance. I remember when just calling long distance was a big event.
Oh, it was
If you were in New
expensive.
York and you called Pennsylvania, it was already a rarity. And now, people talk everywhere in the world and they write everywhere in the world. You're not going to see you're not going to see cursive writing, maybe, except for the 10 or 15 minutes every other week that it might be done. You're not going to have a chance at acquiring it. It's the difference between learning a language through an immersion method and learning a language. How would you learn a language if your classes were 10 or 15 minutes long every other week?
You don't.
I mean, that you tried and it has not worked.
I mean, even now when it's an hour, like I had horrible instruction in foreign language because I waited till I was older and I tried to learn French, but it didn't really help me. I should have been immersed in it more when I was younger.
I mean, there are methods that can replicate immersion even if you're older. There are actually schools and camps and stuff where even adults basically sign an oath to only use, let's say, Chinese or whatever it is. And they literally go to a foreign language resort where basically you don't check your email, you don't do anything except do what you do in a resort in the foreign language. There's actually one not too far from where I live in a town called New Paltz, and people literally go there for their vacation. And after like 4 weeks, they come out speaking basic Japanese or whatever, and they can get by.
That's pretty cool.
And they come back the next year and they're speaking, upper intermediate Japanese. But that's because you are immersed in the environment and you have no escape. You know that if they catch you looking at your cell phone and it's in English, they're going to kick you out and you will not get your money back, leaving this very lovely resort. And the situation with a child, of course, is not just that they're more flexible, but exposure. If you are a child, you don't have a job to go to, you basically have 16 hours a day with 2 personalized tutors talking at you and showing you how to understand what they mean. It would work for adults too if we did it for adults. It's probably a little easier for kids, but if you had 2 teachers, 1 student, 16 hours a day for 4 years, you would be practically native in whatever you were learning yourself.
This is true.
But to get that, Now, to get back to handwriting, if you're going to teach entirely by rote, this squiggle, this piece of spaghetti is a G. This other one is an S. Just memorize them. There's no explanation. The teacher doesn't even know where they came from. So how will you know? And in fact, I've unfortunately heard teachers say there is no answer. It just always was, which is baloney. It is absolute baloney.
So
now,
true.
In fact, I would like you to show the other graphic.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that one.
Now, here is how we should be teaching, and here's how it's done in Read Cursive Fast. If you want someone to make sense of a letter G and not forget it like any random association, what would you do?
What would we do?
Well, why don't you put up that other graphic with the G that had several G's, and why don't you show us? Okay. Now, meanwhile, can you get that up? And while you do, yes. Now, maybe we could zoom in on this. You can see that we have a printed G, we have a cursive G, and we can see the long history over centuries of how one turned into another. Now, this doesn't have any dates, and it leaves out some of the transitional forms, the intermediate stages, because this is something I would show to a quite small child who could read print. In other words, if you can see that the one you might have taught the kid to write is a G, you can see that the next one is a G. And if you can see that number 2 is a G, you can see that number 3 is. You can trace them all if you like, and you can see by the time you get to the last one, which might be in some school book someplace, that yes, the original early G is still hiding in there. It's exactly where your pointer shows. It's simply the upper half and upper right corner of the letter.
It's tricky, but you see, I do see it.
In fact, while we look at this, I'm looking for a graphic that I forgot to include, which
Okay.
if I can find it during the show, I will send it to you in
For
Messenger.
sure, yeah.
Put it up.
Yeah, just
And
send it.
it's simply a little facetious graphic that I call ABCD evolution, as in evolution or devolution. And if I can find it, I will send it. If I can find it, I will send it to you, because I actually once made a T-shirt of it. It
Ooh.
hasn't. It didn't sell very well because it was a T-shirt that had to be explained. But I actually sold a fair number back when trade shows and conferences were not virtual. I
Mhm.
actually made a T-shirt, and I'm going to see. I'm going to see if I can copy that, pop it into a messenger message, and then you'll be able to show it in even get even close up. I actually have my phone up and my tablet up, so
Okay.
that I can, because that's how I do two screens, and I want to
Oh, for
see.
sure. Yeah.
And I think you might have to. Okay, now I just sent this in Messenger,
Okay, let me
and
go
it
look
has the
for it.
name of one of my businesses at the bottom. But the important stuff is ABCD evolution. And if you can put it up, for those, believe me, anyone can read the type font I use. The handwriting is another matter for some of the samples, but if you put it up, I will read you every day. Do you see it, Julia?
Yeah, I just have to get there. It takes a second.
Yeah,
That's
well, you
all.
put this up. And by the way, this is something that if anyone wants to print these up as a poster or something, let's just say I think you know someone who does print on demand.
Oh yeah. I mean,
You might
Zazzle.
want to ask her if she would like to resurrect this as a poster, or it could even be printed on things like a notebook cover. Anyway, ABCD evolution. A
I do
quick
my own print
history.
on demand too, actually. Like
Oh,
just
could
through
you? Well,
Zazzle.
I would
Yeah, I
love
do.
if you
So
could
if
print
you
and I
want to
could
share
get a
it with me,
little.
I'd be happy.
Yes, we should talk about this after the show. So anyway, this is a
Okay.
quick history of our handwriting. At the top, we see something amazingly clear. A handwriting exercise from the year 1522, at the time, in the first handwriting textbook that was ever published in our alphabet. And this was a textbook published in Rome, Italy in 1522, actually by a guy who worked at the Vatican as a professional scribe. And people had asked him to put his best handwriting into a book, and he did it. He actually owned a printing press, and there were people who did so in that time. Next, we see 1620, still recognizably the same style, but a little more casual, a few little twiddly widdlies, as I call them, the year of the Mayflower Compact. So we have some very American handwriting here. These are all American examples because I'm American, but
Of course, yeah.
1787, the year of the Constitution. We see what's happened. And that is a sample from the Constitution. 1863, the year of the Gettysburg Address. And that's Lincoln's handwriting. Now, today, if any handwriting is still taught at all, our educational custom relies on changing methods by and large. You learn some print style, and then it's changed to some cursive style. And there may be other changes along the way if you are changing schools or changing districts or states/provinces,
Mhm.
because very often different schools, different districts, even different teachers in one school will have different ideas on what kind of printing to use and what kind of cursive to use.
That's
Now,
true. That's
if there are any
examples
Bart
like
Simpson
Danelian.
fans out there, Julia, are you a Bart Simpson fan by any chance?
I watched it growing up in the '90s. I know a little bit about it. My sister is
Yeah, I mean,
hardcore, but I know a little. Yeah.
I watched a few of the episodes, and in fact, I will tell you the reason I didn't watch more was I was seeing I could become addicted, and I had to go cold turkey. But one of the episodes that I saw and that I recommend everyone to see is an episode called You Only Move Twice, which is where the Simpson family temporarily moves because of the father's work. And so Bart is in a different school for a while. And the thing is, Bart, like many students, he's moving between the second and the third grade. When he was in second grade, his teacher was of the school of thought that cursive should happen and would happen in the third grade. When he gets to his new school, where they believe that cursive, changing over to cursive, happened in the second grade. And it happened for people who were not new to that district. So Bart is basically considered to be intellectually disabled, and he's put in a special education class for people who have cognitive problems, shall we say, not because of any problem of his own, but because he cannot, he cannot read what's going on in his new classroom, and it's not as if he'll take time to teach him because, that's been done already. And many of my students are like this. Now, if we had a simple and streamlined writing system, as European civilization, Western civilization had in the Italian Renaissance, we wouldn't have such problems, even if different teachers had different ideas on when to join up your letters. It wouldn't be like, hi, overnight, it's a whole different alphabet, and we're not even going to teach you how it relates to the one you know. It'll be by rote. There's also what I like to call handwriting banner collapse, which makes no sense to you, but it will. How many of you have had the experience of being in a classroom and there's typically a banner of sorts, a long piece of cardboard?
Oh, yes. That's
and it has like A, B, B, uppercase, lowercase, printed and or cursive. Well, very often a school that mandates teaching cursive, of course, will have that up there for all or most of the years during which cursive is supposed to be taught. And I said about half of the U.S. states have, and it's about the same percentage of Canadian provinces have laws on the books for cursive, although not all the schools enforce them, not all the districts enforce them, but a lot of them do. And let's say you're in school, first grade printing, you learn it. Second grade printing, you learn it. Either second or third grade, depending on what the curriculum says and what the teacher's ideology is. All of a sudden, you go home Friday, you come home Monday, different writing system up there. So second or third grade, cursive banner. Fourth grade, cursive banner. It might be up there in fifth grade or sixth grade, but at some point in fourth grade or fifth grade or sixth grade, one of those, maybe even in third grade, they take down the banner, and all of a sudden the classroom erupts in people asking, how do you do a G? I forgot how to do an H.
I remember all that. Yeah.
It was up there, and they could sort of grind through it, copying passively but not read it, which is what I did. In other words, I did very much what I would do if you gave me a page of, Chinese, or you gave me a page of Arabic or something. I could copy them, and if you told me, oh, this letter stands for that sound, and this is the name of that letter, I could memorize it, but it would be a very weak sort of memory. And if you took away the crutches, if you took away the crutches and you asked me, write, I don't know, Taliban or Afghanistan, or, or write, whatever it might be in whatever language, even if I'd been told the letters, I would be asking, I forgot how you do a T in this script, which is literally what I was asking. I forgot how to do a T in script. Back when I was a kid, New York, 1960s, 1970s, we didn't call it cursive, we called it script. Confusingly for people anywhere else in the English-speaking world, because if you go to England or you go to India, there the word script means print. So the point is, you have a lot of people like me who just never got it through a rote learning channel that did not work for them. And you have people who forgot it. They forgot it, and all of a sudden, these people are going to school. They may not be able to read such cursive as they encounter, which could be anything from things they have to study in school, if it's, history or archaeology or something. It could be the professor's writing on the board if the professor is above a certain age. It could be some fancy font that's on the textbook cover, or even on the fast food store that they go to, or on products they buy. I have known people who couldn't meet someone who had said, let's meet next to the jewelry store. Guys picking out an engagement ring for his, fiance, and says, well, let's meet at House of Fancy Jewelry. And she can't find it because she has no idea which of the squiggles on all the jewelry shops in the street spell House of Fancy Jewelry. Now, I mean, this happens enough. The most recent pop culture recognition of not reading cursive. I don't know if anyone watches a show called Outer Banks, which is on Netflix. And you know about that show?
I haven't seen it. Is it good?
Well, it's basically it's pretty good. I've seen the trailer. I haven't seen a lot of the episodes, but one thing I'm aware of. Well, the show, for those who don't know, is about a bunch of teenagers who get involved in solving mysteries. In other words, it's almost like Scooby-Doo, but more sophisticated and live action. They're really digging into corruption, like the local mafia or old crimes that are cold cases. At one point, the most popular guy in the show, who's a young man called JJ, he needs to read something, has to admit to someone he can't read cursive. I actually, I am, it's hard to get product placement. Netflix is not going to, take a suggestion that, hey, someone should get him this book unless I had an agent. I'm not going to spring for that. But I did discuss it with a lot of Outer Banks fans on Twitter. Outer Banks is sometimes known as OBX on Twitter. And I basically, when they would mention JJ's disclosure, I would say someone should talk. Someone from the fan club should talk to people at Netflix and say, well, what if his girlfriend gives him this book or something? I don't think it will happen, but I wanted all the fans to know about the book because their favorite guy on the show cannot read cursive. And if only we had my book.
Maybe they need to feature your book on one of the episodes. Just kidding.
They should, but it's hard to get product placement for something that in other words, I'm not, you basically would have to hire an agent to do it. I'm not at that point.
I know.
But I know that Netflix people listen to their fan clubs, so I did discuss it. I'm just having a little trouble. This trying to get a little better situated. I'm having some trouble putting it up.
Do you like it when it's wider with the black bar on top? Do you prefer that, or do you like it like this horizontal?
I think they're both fine. I don't care which it is.
Okay.
I don't care. You can see a banner, love in the background. My nieces sent me to that as a present once upon a time. Aww. That's not in cursive. Actually, it was my brother and his kids who are my nieces. So I understand. Now, I don't want to give away too much, but when my book came out, my brother sort of said, well, my daughters don't have any problem reading cursive at their age. And it did turn out later, well, he hadn't noticed. A lot of parents don't notice, and a lot of times when the parent or the teacher sees it, it's a surprise. And like, how could you not know this? Well, duh, you didn't teach it, or you even teach us how to read it. Now, remember that newspaper article? I gave the date of it. That came out in 2013.
Oh, yeah. I kind of
Those college students wouldn't think they would now be young adults. If they couldn't read cursive in 2013, who would have come along and taught them to read cursive by 2021? I mean, that doesn't happen in college. They're out of college. They're in graduate school, or they're working, or some of them probably have families. They're probably old enough at the moment to be teachers. They're probably old enough at the moment, some of them, that they could be school teachers. And in fact, to my personal knowledge, a lot of the cursive companies are having trouble with the fact that there are teachers who are supposed to teach cursive. They're in some state where it's mandated, or some province where it's mandated, and they can't read the book that they are mandated to teach this mandated subject out of. Can you imagine being a teacher in your late 20s, early 30s, and knowing on the curriculum, we're supposed to teach you all the cursive capital G today? I can't do it. I don't know what it looks like. I'll try. Can you imagine being that teacher? Who would come along and at least teach you to read it? And I'm not just saying help the teachers. I'm saying help the kids. One of the most freakiest thing, when I was in second grade, starting cursive at the school I attended then and totally failing. Well, what freaked me out was not just the fact that I was sent to the principal because they thought I was being lazy and willfully disobedient and Not just the fact that I felt like subhuman next to the kids who were getting it. I think there was one other kid in the class who got it, who didn't quite get it, but she got it a little better than I am. And from knowing her, I believe that she would now be diagnosed as dyslexic, which I eventually was. Well, she was in trouble, and I was in more trouble because my problems, my issue with cursive were worse than hers. I could pick out a lot less, like maybe if it was a K or a T or something. But if you asked me, if you put an assignment on the board and I was supposed to write this down and take it home and do it, I could not. But imagine the worst thing was whatever day it was. I think it was sometime in October. We came back from the weekend, and the schedule in whatever textbook was that, here comes cursive. All of a sudden, boom, cursive. So I came in, there was a new book, and, I could read. Despite I was eventually diagnosed as dyslexia, I could read. And I will tell you, so here I'm in a class where I can read the English book, I can read the math book, I can read the history book, I can read the science book, but I can't read this other English book I just got. Wouldn't it be great, whether you like cursive or you do not like cursive, if you do not like cursive, for the sanity of others, make sure they know how to read it. If you like cursive and you're going to teach them cursive, why not make sure they can read it before you expect them to write it too?
Yeah.
Why not make sure, that they can read it to the extent that they would read print? I have actually taught the occasional, let's say 4, 5, 6-year-old, basically how to read cursive if they could read print, and it totally freaked out their parents no end. Also, I will tell you that this would flat out destroy the big argument everyone uses for writing cursive. Oh, it's the only way you can read it. And, we want people to read the Constitution, everything from the Constitution to their bosses' scribbled memos to grandma's old love letters if you find them. And if you say, oh, you must write this very, very, very difficult alphabet or you will never, never, never be able to read it. Well, what does that mean for people who physically or neurologically cannot write? Or for anyone really, what happens if we could teach kids who read print to read cursive? If we could routinely do this, as I've done it when I've had the chance, that whole argument is blown out of the water, and the people who want cursive would have to find a better reason. And by the way, signatures is not the better reason. Because legally, and you can look this up or ask any attorney anywhere in the USA, Canada, or the world, do signatures legally require cursive? And the lawyers will tell you no. Your signature is whatever you produce when you intend to produce your signature.
And I've been sharing that with people actually because people ask me, like, does my signature need to be in cursive?
Oh,
and
yeah, they will. Now, there might be some individuals who will tell you, oh, it needs to be in cursive, and they might be working someplace at, the Department of Motor Vehicles or something, but you can show them. What are they going to do about it? Are they going to ask you to have a different signature? And some people will say, oh, but if it's cursive, it's more elaborate and it can't be faked. Leaving aside the fact that most cursive signatures are just a scribble, and we know that. But even if it's done properly, questioned document examiners who are the experts in forgery identification. I apologize for my face looking so red. I've got some allergies, and the makeup and makeup did not just stay on today because my allergies were so bad. But question document examiners will tell you that the most forgery-proof signatures are the structurally simplest, including even the printed ones. Contrary to what they used to think, it turns out that that's the case. In fact, professional forgers, the ones who've been caught out and have, changed their ways, written books about the profession, they will tell you that when they look for a victim to commit forgery on, let's say they have a choice between 2 or 3 people in the same job and they want to find out whom to forge and rip off, they will look for the one with the most cursive, most elaborate, messiest signature. If you print, the forger will probably pass you by if you print your signature. Just the opposite of what we were all told. Now, I
Yeah,
don't want
that
to be
makes
so
sense.
harsh and say your teachers lied to you about signatures. It could be someone lied to them. It could be
Yeah.
that someone lied to them. But in any case, whatever kind of school you send someone to, whether you're talking public school, private school, homeschooling, isn't it time to stop lying to our children about the law of the land?
Yeah, they should, but
I
even
mean, if you
adults
think
don't
not
know.
being able to read the Constitution of your country is bad, and it is bad, imagine that. Actually, not too long ago, I actually heard from someone who was, it was someone I saw on a social media channel. I don't even want to tell you where, because he was a very well meaning man and very polite most ways. But he actually said that he knew that having to write cursive was important, was the law, and was in the Constitution. And I said, well, could you please show me where it is in the Constitution? And he, disappeared. He didn't answer. And it was very ironic because he was using you must know cursive as his argument for, in other words, if you don't learn cursive, you won't be able to read the Constitution. And maybe that's why they are taking cursive out of the schools. He went on and on about that. So here he's telling the rest of the world, or the rest of the USA at least, learn cursive so you can read the Constitution. And he did it. I mean, I literally asked him, what article of the Constitution is this so I can look it up? My husband's teacher, who's old but still alive, is a constitutional lawyer. I doubt he listens to this broadcast, but if he does, he's probably, just standing up and laughing. I would say
Yeah,
lying on the floor laughing, but he's a more dignified fellow than that.
yeah, it's
And
funny.
can you imagine? And the scary thing was that this man is a teacher. He's a homeschooling teacher of his kids. And it's great that a man should work with his kids. Education should not be girl stuff all the time. But imagine he's homeschooling. They're getting everything they know about history and politics and the law and whatever from their dad. And what is their dad telling them? Now, one day, they might find out, but what if they don't read the Constitution and they just trust their dad? Hey, what if they forget how to read cursive before they get around to reading the Constitution?
Yeah, that might be a little problematic. But hopefully they go online and they learn about other viewpoints. Hopefully.
Yeah, now, which is a lot of homeschoolers, as you know, unfortunately, do not let people go online, do not
Oh,
let their
that's
kids
true.
go
Yeah,
online
they're
until
kind
they
of
move out.
strict.
And often these people move out very late, like, well, because a lot of people move out late. Look, I wasn't homeschooled, but I didn't leave home until I was 30 and got married. And I'm sure that's not uncommon these days. But imagine leaving home and never having heard anything except what your parents told you or what was in parentally approved textbooks, which are some textbooks are excellent, some are odious. But imagine, I have known cases where homeschoolers made up their own textbooks, and again, some of those were
Mhm.
excellent, some were odious. I mean, I actually years ago ran into a homeschooling family where the parents had decided basically that the kids would never hear that they were Native Americans. Go
Wow.
figure. I
Yikes.
don't now. I don't want to go into that. I'm sure that such persons are in the minority, and I will be very fair. I've known people in conventional schools who were teachers and who had equally nutty ideas and who taught those.
True. Yeah.
But my question is, whether if you don't like cursive, you need people to read it. You need read cursive fast. If you do
Yep.
like cursive, why not make sure that your kids can make sense of cursive by seeing how it happened rather than straight out arbitrariness? Why not see that there's some reality behind it? I mean, whether I do or don't like how a cursive G looks, and I don't, that doesn't mean I shouldn't teach anyone how it looks so that they will remember it better. And how so much more if you're someone who actually does like cursive as we know it. I do not like the conventional cursive. Now, we can talk sometime about handwriting styles and their pros and cons, a sort of consumer reports. I'm mentioning this because I've actually submitted a paper to a conference on handwriting which will happen in January of next year.
Oh,
But it will happen
exciting.
virtually, so don't worry.
Well, virtually
And,
is great. Maybe
and
more
this is
people can
actually
watch it.
run. In fact, I will tell you that if you go and look up conference dot handwritingcollaborative.com, you will find this conference. It's part of a larger site called handwritingcollaborative.com. And what's cool about it is the person who founded the conference that starts this year, who founded the organization, both of whose links I'm going to put in for you at some point.
Mhm.
She actually worked for various handwriting companies for about over 30 years. The longest one that she worked in was Zahner Blosser, which is one of the biggies, one of very much print and then conventional cursive. And she actually resigned. Let's just say I'm not at liberty to discuss why she resigned.
Mhm.
However, I think it is fair for me to mention that many handwriting companies misquote research in order to make the research support cursive and support what they are doing. And that, let us say that sometimes they are cut out. Sometimes people in those companies are even caught out because customers write letters and document what's going on and do things like, here's the link you had in your document for teachers. Here is the document to which that link refers. Again, I will not say why she resigned, as she has never publicly discussed that in detail, but let us just say that I am aware of reasons behind a lot of handwriting company staff resignations and changes of staff over time. And let's just say that this is something that comes up. And since she has a conference, coming up, and since let's just say I've known her for years in very good terms, well, I've just sent you two links. One is to the conference, and one is just to her
Okay,
organization
let
that
me
you can
see.
join that puts together the conference. And her organization is cool because she actually has a stable of teachers online. There's a part of her website where you can go and ask for a teacher to teach you conventional printing or conventional cursive or italic. Guess who does the italic?
Who? This
Me.
lady?
Yeah. So
Wow.
basically we can do this. At some point in the near future, she will be adding a bookstore link, and my book will be on, and there will also be at least one other person's book on, a terrific book about dysgraphia
Oh,
by
that sounds
someone
great.
else. Yeah. So I want you to know that everyone says the computer killed handwriting, but I think it's active today. We are having a sort of storm, a hurricane. And this is on my mind because a hurricane has hit
Well,
the East Coast.
well,
You
I have
know,
an idea. Do we want to continue talking a little bit later, like maybe next week or in a couple weeks about this
oh,
topic?
if you want to do a part two, great. I'd love to assemble some questions. Now, if you would for a moment put up the four graphics
Oh,
that were
that
being
yeah, that's what I'm
covered.
trying. I'm trying to get there, but I'm having like a connectivity issue with Facebook. It's
Well,
weird.
I will tell you what. I will tell you what I will do. I will see if I have those graphics and some of them, and I want to see now the one that we could actually show. Some of them you have to see to get, but there is
Yeah.
one graphic that shows up what I think the handwriting situation or the handwriting teaching situation in this country and in many other countries has been allowed to become. I know of Canada having these problems, also India, also Brazil, also
This is
big
true.
chunks of the UK. I want you to imagine, if you will, that there is a frying pan frying an egg. I want you to imagine that this frying pan is being held by a mother hen. And I
Mhm.
want you to imagine that the hen is talking to the egg and saying, when you get older, you'll understand. And if you don't know why that is cringy, think a little. And
Oh
basically,
yeah.
this was my mental image for my school experience
Yeah, I
of
actually want to show that
handwriting.
graphic.
That I,
I'm
you know, that I was told, oh, this is going to all work. It'll all make sense in the end. And then it didn't make sense unless and what I was taught did not make sense. In fact, I'll give you a little mind blower of a fact that stops some teachers from feeling confident about what they're doing. But of course, it also stops some people from liking me because they can't stand knowing this is a fact. There is actually research, which I could discuss here at any time, which I will discuss in my conference if my submission is accepted, which I won't know probably for a month or two, that actually shows that the fastest and most legible handwriters, no matter how they're taught or at any grade level, are people who, whatever they're taught, are joining some letters. Not all of them, not none of them really, some letters, making the easiest joins and connections and skipping the rest, and using print-like shapes for, many or even all of the letters whose printed and cursive shapes disagree. Now, this is what research says makes the most practical handwriting, but if you were to do this, it
Uh-huh.
wouldn't even be allowed if your school
Wow.
cared at all about handwriting. Imagine being in any class where handwriting was taught. Now, if handwriting isn't taught, a percentage of people will come up with this, and a percentage of that percentage will even do it well, basically reinventing italic, like the joke about reinventing the wheel. But most people won't come up with it. And of course, the kids who come up with it or could come up with it, if they're being taught conventional cursive by some state mandate or conventional print and then cursive by some state mandate. In other words, you literally have something that's documented by research as being best, if not, legally forbidden by a law someplace, basically being banned and not even mentioned as existing by the preponderance of textbooks. Now imagine if you were training for a sport. We had the Olympics. Imagine if you were training for Olympic rowing, and if the way they trained you was to teach you two opposite techniques of rowing and never mentioned a third technique which combined the best elements of both, and you were not allowed to even know about the third technique. And then maybe you got up there and you find out that the people from the other countries or from some of the other countries know it. And maybe you go back to your coach and say, I've got one more chance to be in the Olympics. Can I learn it? And they would say, no, because our athletic organization mandates that the only two techniques that exist are the ones I taught you. But, and you show whatever training manual, videos, whatever. No, officially our position is that it does not exist. And that
Wow.
last sentence, by the way, is a direct quote from someone who is actually looking at some books from my library, some books from the USA, some books from some other places, literally looking at pages and not even, I can understand if someone says, I don't like it and here's why. I could have a discussion with them. I could understand if someone says, oh, this is great, but I'm just not allowed to do it. But if someone says, I can't even look at this, I can't afford to know this is out there, which were other sentences that came up in that conversation. If someone says that, where do you go from there? I mean, and I pointed out to her that if you say this style doesn't exist, you're basically saying that the very first ever handwriting book, the ancestor of the one that you're using, didn't exist. You're saying that all the people with this handwriting, who include names from Michelangelo to Copernicus and onward, even Isaac Newton, are you saying they didn't write? And she just, if you've ever seen a baby deer in the headlights, which I have, it was exactly that.
Wow.
And, do we want people to live in a world where we're lying to the next generation about something like handwriting? Because it occurs to me that a child grows up, and if a child finds out that he or she has been lied to, the child says, if they lied to me about that, what else do they lie about? Do I trust them, or is the world just chaos? In other words, if you have someone who can't trust you about basics that they learn in third grade, maybe they don't trust you about math or sanitation or things that are, really super important. Maybe they just decide that everything